Yeah, it's really a dream come true because it became true as we did more of it. Then suddenly the dream became true. Like we set out to create a relationship that ran on positive energy instead of the usual thing, which is have a good time, have an argument, have a good time, have an argument, have a good time. Criticize, have a good time, decide to build a house. Have a good there's expensive variations of that. But we decided we had never seen a relationship where there wasn't a lot of criticism in it. So one thing we decided to do was to eliminate criticism, if we possibly could, to absolutely eliminate it. And we didn't know if it was possible or not, and it probably took us probably 10 or 15 years to really eliminate, because we would eliminate it for 3 months and then some little thing would happen. But for the last 10 or 15 years there's been zero criticism.
Zero criticism.
And so imagine what that could be like. Imagine a planet where that was occurring. Imagine a political system. I actually do and can imagine a political system where people don't sit around just criticizing each other. They actually do things to make life better, And I mean, what a concept, And that's the world I want to live. I find it incredibly embarrassing when we send these expensive politicians to Washington and they sit there and act like junior high students throwing spitballs at each other. It's basically a spitball game. And I find that personally really disgusting. And so we want to create a life where people can really see that it's possible to run on positive energy. You don't actually have to criticize other people. And you can just get about making life better for everybody. So I think that, for us, the miracle has come true. But I can see
a bigger
miracle coming true here on this planet as a result of some of the seeds that folks are planting out there.
Definitely. And then, so positive energy, how were you challenged in that? Because you said it took 15 years, so...
I mean, look at us. We're both incredibly stubborn. We both have a real tendency to think that we're right.
Yes, but we're nothing compared to our parents. If you met our parents, you would say, oh my God, how did Gay and Katie get here? Everybody that's ever met them has had that reaction. They've all passed on now, so I can speak freely about this. But I cannot count the number of people that after they have met some member of my family say, where did you come from anyway? And because where I grew up in the Deep South, I was born in 1945, so I grew up in the Deep South in the 50s and the 60s and that kind of thing.
Pre-civil rights.
Yeah, there was, it was a time of segregation, and women were particularly devalued. There was no women's liberation yet anywhere. And so the context in which I grew up in was one in which women and men occupied very different roles. And so to invent a kind of a relationship of equality, even if nothing else had occurred, that would be a titanic achievement, just an awesome achievement. And
so really directly to speak to the challenge, when one of us would get stuck, and one of us being right, or I would feel really hurt and misunderstood, and whatever.
I would feel like she's just all feelings. Why can't she think logically about things?
And he's just so tight up there in his brain that if he could just spread out and breathe, which you're supposed to be a specialist at. So when we would get into these, what would really make the difference was that moment of kind of coming back to square one, that moment of recommitting where we go, okay, are we still interested? Are you still interested? Am I still interested in creating a relationship that runs on positive energy? And then when we would kind of go, yes.
We'd finally come back. It might sometimes take days or maybe even weeks sometimes in the early days.
3 weeks and 2 days.
3 weeks and 2 days, where we were just convinced it was the other person's fault, And I tell you, but I got to keep referring back to my parents and grandparents, because I grew up next door to my grandparents, and they were incredibly more stubborn than my mother. And my mother's incredibly more stubborn than I am, And so going back a few generations, I feel like,
good trend.
Man, I'm on vacation compared to what I saw around me growing up.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
So people are constantly detoxing their bodies and their physical bodies. I would love to hear how we can detox our thoughts, our emotions, and our relationships.
Relationship
Such a great
detox.
question.
Yes.
Sounds like a good new reality show. Relationship detox.
Welcome to Relationship Detox.
Well, probably the biggest detox we ever did in our relationship is eliminating blame and criticism.
Yeah.
It was a slow, long detox, but we started out with an intention to
Right.
create a relationship that ran on positive energy. And it took us a number of years to do it, but we gradually caught ourselves and recorrected and caught ourselves and recorrected over a 10 or 15 year period until basically we had eliminated that.
I think it's really important that people make a commitment to end blame and criticism, not to have less of it or to have less conflict. The commitment needs to end that, and so when you find yourself a complaint or a criticism coming out of your mouth, have something that you can shift to. And one really valuable thing to shift to is to appreciate or to make a request about what you really want, because a criticism is often about something that you might think is missing or something that you really want, but you may not even have articulated it. And if you keep complaining or criticizing, people do that because they think it works. And it doesn't really. What really works is to take a breath, tune into what you're feeling, and then to either appreciate or make a request. And that's part of what we did to really not only end blame and criticism, but to do something more valuable.
Right.
Well, also, you have to think of blame and criticism as an addiction. It's kind of like refined sugar of the relationship world. Because every time you blame or criticize the other person, you're disempowering yourself, because you're saying, I'm not willing to take responsibility for this that's happening right now. I'm going to transfer the responsibility over to you. And of course, the other person doesn't say, wow, thanks,
gee,
I appreciate that.
More for me to do.
Yeah,
Wow, great.
they're going to point the finger back at you. And then the energy goes around and around and around and gets eaten up in the relationship. And it's pretty much the same relationship I think people have with sugar and other kinds of drugs like that, is that it becomes a substitute. It becomes a thing that you do instead of the real thing. And so I think one of the best things you can do is remove those kinds of addictions, and probably the number one addiction is to blame and criticism. And it's true for yourself too, blame and criticism of yourself. We found that it's possible to get by just fine without blame. That neither one of us have become worse persons over the years because we weren't blaming each other or criticizing.
I think we could actually have people vote on that, and it's not just our opinion. And what we put our attention on instead is on supporting each other's creativity and appreciating each other. And appreciating works a lot better than criticizing. If you really put your focus on appreciating, then those qualities in your partner really grow, and the others tend to just fade away. If you're not giving attention to them, then they don't get fed. But when you criticize, that thing that you're criticizing actually gets attention. So we've been putting our attention on a couple of different things besides appreciating. One that I really love is being willing to learn from each interaction. That's a super magic move, is in the midst of whatever, what could I learn from this?
Yeah, that's an incredibly important one, because it gets down to what your basic intentions are for yourself and for being in the relationship. Like for me, I came into the relationship thinking I was one kind of person that didn't need to learn much from her job was to get more like me. That was what I originally thought. And if she would just act more like me, then we'd be happy. But I've come to a totally different, many years ago I realized, wow, I have got the great gift of being in relationship with this incredible evolving goddess, this incredible natural work of art that's coming to life right in my hands and right in front of my eyes, and my job is to nurture that and be with that and learn from that and see what I can model for it from myself. And so I think both of us kind of developed an attitude of learning like that, and it really makes a huge difference. I remember one time we were on a talk show, on a television talk show, and the host, we're a very slick guy, you know the kind of person I'm talking about, very suave kind of person. After the show, he called me over to the side and he said, "Can I ask you a personal question?" And I said, "Sure." And he said, "The way you are with your wife," he says, you look like you're listening to her in a special sort of way, and I've never quite seen any of our guests do it. And he said, how do you do that? He said, I want to learn how to do that. And I said, well, number one, I'm actually interested in what she's saying. And he went, whoa. You know, he's sort of like, oh, I hadn't thought of that. You know, actually genuinely being interested, you know. But to me, the next thing that's going to come out of your mouth is the most fascinating thing in the world.
That's how I feel about you. Because you're always making things up, and you were doing that this morning. I was listening to you, and you can bring these really complex thoughts from space and articulate them in a way that people can really receive them and make a difference in their lives. Plus, I think your voice is very sexy.